So it's recording. You can go ahead and start.
Okay, let's see if I can. Okay. Perfect. Sorry guys for not being able to start my video. For some reason I'm having technical issues here. But I can share with you the presentation. So yes, my name is Tristan. My former role that I was working with is at Air Canada. I was a diversity and development specialist. I worked there for a couple of years. And specifically, one of my mandates was working on the Gender X policy. This was across basically the company. Now, because I did a little bit of research into Gender X, I want to talk to you a little bit about gender in medicine from both a personal angle and just an educational angle as well. So that's why I'm here today. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so the agenda today, what I'm going to be talking about is the terminology, basically, gender and its variances, its different spheres, right? Okay, I'm going to talk about Gender X, what it is to be Gender X. I'm going to talk about areas that touch in gender for the medical environment, the ecosystem, which is very important because you guys are going to be a part of it. You are a part of it, right? I'm going to be talking about transgender and individuals who are transgender, which is very different, but can be the same as Gender X. Okay, and my personal journey as somebody who is transgender, as well as the challenges that I personally have faced, some of my friends have personally have faced, and recommendations, both on a patient aspect as well as medical practitioner aspect. Okay, so there we are. I'm just gonna keep an eye on the time because I tend to go off. Okay, so terminology. Let's talk about terminology. So before we fly into kind of what I want to get at within the medical field, let's just see what gender is, right? Like what kinds of genders are there? So there's the male, right, gender, and the female gender, right? That's usually what you think of when you think of gender. Okay, but there's three spheres that are very well defined, but can also merge with one another. And these three spheres are, so there's biological gender, right? So how we are born, right? There is gender identity. Okay, so how we identify our gender. And you'll notice that this is all individual, like it's for the person, right? How I identify, how you identify, how you are born, right? Okay. And then, of course, the third one is gender expression. And that is, yes, how you express, but how others perceive how you express gender, right? And its variances, okay? So these are the three main spheres: is biological, identity, and gender expression. Okay, so let's see examples of all three of these just to get a clearer picture. So gender, let's look at gender, biological gender first. Okay, so you'll see two images here. The images I chose are very conceptual in a sense of they're cells. Okay. You'd think that the left one, the left image, the circular image, was like a planet, but it's not. It's cells. Okay. These images I took in a lab working as a bioartist. So I was working in a lab. I was working with a lot of pathogens. Okay. And the image on the left, the circular image, is osteosarcomas. Now you're probably saying, well, why do you have osteosarcomas on the screen? Okay, well, it's very simple. Okay, when you're thinking of biological gender, you're thinking of, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of your outer membrane, right? How it's formed, like tissue, right? Cells are like tissue. We are biological matter. I mean, right? We are moving, we're shifting, our form is shifting, our hormones are shifting constantly over time, okay? It's like basically the skins of cells, right? They're biological matter. So we are identified by our outer skin by how we're formed, right? Okay, it's the same as this, the image on the right, which is HFFs, which are human foreskin cells, and cervical cancer cells, so HeLa cells, Henrietta Lacks cells, okay? Very gendered in their form, right? One is taken from a woman, one's taken from a man. They're formed differently, right? They have, one's more elongated, that's the HFFs. The HeLas are the kind of the more triangular ones. They grow differently, they're shaped differently, but they all have the same parts, right? They all have like a nuclei, they all have a mitochondria, they all have, you know, all these parts. They just work differently, function differently, shape differently. Well, biologically, when we're born differently, right? So that's where I'm getting with that for the biological gender, okay? So let's look at other examples for gender identity, okay? So you think of a gender identity, what do you think of, right? Well, the first example would be physical ID, okay? So physical ID, you think of, well, I put a passport here because of my former job. I was working with a lot of travel passports where you're going globally, especially in relation to gender X, right? Because now gender X was legalized in Canada, and it has been legalized in many other countries, which I will go over later on in this presentation. But it was legalized in Canada as of June of 2019. Now, this means that X is on passports, okay? Now, so that's just one example of physical ID. I'm sure, like you guys, if you guys brainstorm, like what other physical ID do you have in hospitals, for example, right? So you have your employee ID, right? Whether it has gender on it or not, doesn't matter, but employee ID, okay? You have your hospital card. That has, depending on the hospital, it possibly has gender, right? Okay, and then you have your health card, right? And the health card is linked with health, your forms, right? Your kind of your files, right? Your records, right? As well as insurance, right? So, so these are the kind of physical IDs that you can start to see and maybe think about in relation to medicine and gender identity, because some of them have gender identity on them, some of them don't, okay? And I'll go over that as well later on in the presentation, okay? So those are some things that, so physical ID is one of them. Let's look at another, digital systems. Now we're in a digital age of, you know, transformation. We are moving everything from paper to digital, right? So there's more and more need for IT support, for information transfers to, so a lot of things, including ID, identification, right? Or sex, name, prefix, okay? You're thinking prefix, Mr., Miss, Ms., right? Is all being put into the digital system. So that's something that you can also see gender in a hospital setting and medical field, as well as many other fields in different sectors, but medical field is why we're here today. So yes, you can see it in your digital system. So administration, right? And let's see a third example. So semiotics, okay? Signs, symbols, right? There's actually one place that's left in public, in society, where gender, in Canada, I'm going to be specific, in Canada, because there's other places where gender, places and spaces where gender is segregated. But in public, like malls, restaurants, hospitals, there's one place where gender is segregated. Can you guys think of it where it is? I mean, I know you guys are muted, but okay. So it's right. So it's in a yes. Okay. Somebody. Yes. Bathrooms. Yeah. Great. Yes. Please feel free to type in. Okay. Please feel free. So yeah, in the medical field, in the hospitals, you see bathrooms, right? Now, due to this kind of implementation and legalization and gender protection of expression and identity, you'll start to see now that the signs are slowly moving, right? So semiotics are slowly moving. So instead of just having a male and a female sign, you're starting to see kind of a merge or both, right? Or just a door with restroom or bathroom. Okay. Which leads me now onto gender expression, right? So let's look over some of the possible examples, excuse me, of gender expression. Okay. So semiotics again, right? So media is big, right? Media is huge. Media is omnipresent. It's all around us at all times, whether it be on our cell phone, whether it be on the TV, whether it be in the news, whatever, right? It's all around us. So semiotics, how we perceive gender, right? How we visualize gender, okay? So, you know, if we think of female, we think of a dress, right? We think of male, we think of a suit. So I gave you this example. It's very kind of binary, but that's gender expression, right? Okay. So let's look at another one. Okay, media. I talked a little bit about media. Okay. Now, when you think of gender expression and you're thinking specifically of the arts, a lot of like drag queens come to mind. They're an exaggeration of gender expression, right? They're over the top, right? It's the same as drag kings. Okay, they're expressing basically huge masculinity, huge femininity. Not all the time, not all the time, because you know, that's a form of art too. You know, like there's other variances of that. But a lot of times that's what it is. And by the way, that image of the drag queen there, that's a female drag queen. So you don't have to be a drag queen and have to be a man, right? So just so you know, I thought that was an interesting little anecdote. Okay, so that's the second example. Okay, let's look at a third example, fashion, right? So what we wear, anime, right? And androgyny, okay? So kind of trying to blur, maybe mix the gender a little bit so that it's less defined, okay? So these three kind of examples show you kind of a layers of different gender expression you can have. It's not necessarily what you wear. It could be also how you present yourself, how you act, how you walk, how you know. There's different ways of expressing gender, but these are some three examples that I wanted to show you. So let's talk about gender X. Okay, so gender X is it's not M, it's not F. I put X/U because internationally, on some passports it's U. It's not just X. Okay, so I'm trying. So globally, it's either X or U. Okay, so gender X, what is gender X? It's not male or female. It's somewhere in between. It's like a blend. It's people who are either, they see themselves as gender fluid. Okay, they see themselves like somewhere, like one day they could be very masculine, and one day they can be very feminine, and they not just expressed as that, but they identify as that. Okay, so this gender X is identification. Yes, it's expression, but it's more identification, okay? Because this you'll find on IDs, right? Okay, and you'll find in the people's personal information, basically, right? Okay, so this is gender X, okay? Now, gender X, you don't have to be trans to be gender X. You don't have to be gender fluid either. You could be, say, a cis male, so a male who was born as a male, you know, as born as a man biologically, okay? And identify as X because you don't see yourself in that M category, okay? And a lot of people perceive gender X as a part of the trans community. I wouldn't say that's correct. Actually, I'd say that's very much not correct because some people who are trans, and I'll get into that later on in the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about trans and which transgender is. But when you're transitioning or you're trans, you're usually very binary. So either you're trying to transition to the male or you're trying to transition to the female because that's who you identify as, right? It's not usually that you find people who are trans as gender X, although it can happen, not usually, okay? So that's gender X. So where is it recognized? Okay, let's talk about where it's recognized. These are some of the countries where it's recognized. Either they're implementing it into their law or their legislation, so people that are protected, okay, or they're adding X to a driver's license. I know in BC they're already started that. They're including either omission of, so omitting basically the gender from health cards. I know Ontario has been looking at that, okay? But these are some countries and states that they're talking about gender X. Oh, I have a question, okay. Yep, shoot. Oh, okay. Yes, gender X is the equivalent of non-binary. The binary system, right, the binary system is very like male and female. So the question was, is gender X the equivalent of non-binary, right? So yeah, binary is male, female. So X is somewhere within, okay? So pretend like, I hate to say this, the Kinsey scale, because I don't believe in the Kinsey scale, where it's basically a line where male is on one side, female is another, gender X is somewhere in between. Not at the extremity ends, okay, of identification, okay? Okay, so I have another question here. How about gender X related to androgyny? So androgyny, again, is an expression, right? So it's expressing yourself as both male and female, or actually, I shouldn't say that, both feminine and masculine, whether it be traits or fashion or whatnot. It's an expression. So it's a gender expression where gender X is actually an identity. So how you identify as, right? Okay. Yeah, perfect. So these are and please feel free to ask questions at any time, eh? The more the merrier. So these are the countries that are talking about gender XU. So if you're from one of these countries, start poking and prodding and see where they're at with this, all right? I apologize. I've said more about Canada than I have with other countries, but yeah, start poking and prodding and see where your country is or where your state is, and what they're doing about. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So moving on. So that's where we're at. So let's talk about the ecosystem. Okay, so the ecosystem of a medical field, right? We're talking about environments, we're talking about biological entities, we're talking about things that make something happen, right? So if you're talking about the medical system, okay, what do you think of? So what do you think of first? When you're talking about a medical system, what do you think of? Well, one of the big things you would think about is the hospital, right? You know, if you're going to getting medical attention, you're going to go to a hospital, right? You're going to go to a building that houses people, or, you know, that will help you, you know, okay? And this is purely on a patient's view, okay? I'm sure, you know, you guys are part of that ecosystem, right? So this is purely patient view. So this is what a patient thinks, okay? You're going to a hospital, you're going to get treated, everything else, right? Okay. And then what else do you think of? You think of doctors, okay? Doctors, nurses, right? So you think, okay, physicians, right? They're going to treat me, they're going to see me, they're going to evaluate, you know, and help me along my way, right? And then you also think of administration, right? Now, these are the points of contact that most patients have, right? They go into a hospital, they see administration, they talk to the nurse, they talk to the doctor, or an intern, or medical staff member of some kind, okay? And then they leave, right? Now, you're probably wondering, why am I talking about ecosystem and medical field, specific to gender X? Okay, you guys are a part of this ecosystem, right? You guys are the stakeholders, okay? How a hospital is viewed is how the medical practitioners are going to be viewed, and how the ecosystem will be viewed, right? Okay, so a patient doesn't see board of directors. They don't see HR. They don't see researchers. They don't see all the behind stages of what a hospital does, how it acts, how it works, the processes of interactions and communications, and how it runs, right? You are a gear, you are a cog, you help it run, right? Your clients are patients. Without patients, you can't be a doctor, right? Doctors, and without doctors, we don't have health, right? So we need each other. So you're all part of this ecosystem. Now, how does this relate to Gender X? Gender X was legalized, as I said, in Canada and is starting to be legalized in other countries around the world, which is great. And it protects people's gender identity, gender expression. Okay, this is great. But how does this affect the ecosystem? Well, let's do a little looky-see, okay? So administration, okay? Well, let's talk medical practice, reputation, comfortability, okay? So medical practice, if you don't have an inclusive space for your patients, and not just your patients, for your colleagues, say, who identify as gender X, there's going to be a comfortability problem, okay? If there's a comfortability problem, you're not as productive. You're in a bad situation, and it becomes not just unhealthy, but unsafe, right? So in order to make a more inclusive, you have to have some kind of knowledge or awareness of education of gender X, what it is, so that you can share with others who maybe don't have the same education, right? Administration. So let's talk about administration. We're talking about systems, okay? Systems. If you don't have, if a variable is added, okay, like a variable, like gender X, an X, it's a sex identifier, okay? If you don't have that in your systems and somebody comes up to you and identifies as gender X, how do you put that in their file, whether it be for their physical ID, for the hospital card, or for their digital file? And you're probably saying, well, what does this have to do with us, and how does it affect us? Well, if you're given a file, okay, where the person has to select between masculine or feminine, but they don't identify it, first off, they're uncomfortable with administration, and then they come to see you, it's not going to be a very pleasant meeting, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, it's not giving you the tools, or it's setting you up for failure. You need the tools both for system integration. You need the tools also for communication. You need the communication tools so that you know how to address somebody. Like, how do you address somebody who's gender X, right? Okay, it's very simple. If you don't know, say their expression, their gender expression is very androgynous, and you don't know their gender, it's very simple. You just ask them. 99.999% of people will not get upset if you ask them, right? If you could even introduce yourself, say, okay, I'm Dr. Timothy Finley, okay? And I go by him and her, or him and he, okay? What do you go by? You can introduce yourself with your pronouns so that it clearly tells you what pronoun or how they like to be addressed. If they're gender X, they will go by they. That is the pronoun, okay? So communication is key. Communication is key for an institution, any organization, when you're dealing with clients, when you're dealing with your colleagues, your family, who you spend a lot of time with, especially doctors nowadays, right? You spend a lot of time with each other. Communication is key to a successful ecosystem, okay? How am I doing on time? Okay, half an hour, okay. So I'm gonna move on, okay? Transgender. Let's look at transgender, okay? I don't know how much you guys know or how much coverage you have for training of transgender, but I'm just gonna give you a simple definition, okay? Transgender are basically people who were born one way but identify as another. So they're born, say, a female, but they identify as male, okay? Because that's who they are. That's innately how they feel. they should have been born biologically, okay? So in transgender in the community, you'll see a couple of terms. One's F to M, so female to male, right? There's also male to female, okay? And there's also something called GID, okay, gender identity dysphoria. It's not called disorder anymore. It's seen very it's not very seen very well in the transgender community because it's called gender identity dysphoria. Now let's talk. I'm going to tell you a little bit about gender identity dysphoria. So gender identity dysphoria, it's basically, you know, it's how you feel about yourself and your past. So how you feel about being biologically born in the wrong body, basically, right? So some people really struggle with this. Some people don't struggle with it, move on, but choose to eradicate their past. And some people are very open book, okay? It can fluctuate throughout your lifetime from, you know, like you become older and suddenly you don't care anymore about whether people know or not that you were female or male before. Sometimes it never changes, right? But there's a bodily kind of, it's how you view your biological changes or the ways you were born, and how you identify and how you need to be to exist, basically, to live, right? And it's a very, it's a very hard hurdle for some, not so bad for others. Myself, I'm very open. You could ask me any kind of question you want. I was actually been in a documentary on body discourse and gender in society where I was filmed by an MIT documentary filmmaker about gender and body discourse. And she came in and she filmed my top surgery. So I'm very open. Not everybody is or even can be because they struggle with it, okay? So now I'm going to go through my personal journey, okay? And I'll give you a kind of a taste because I'm sure you've heard transgender as the term. I'm sure maybe you've heard about the F to M, M to F, but I don't know if you've actually seen what a personal journey looks like through the medical system, or the different steps that you have to do and the different specialists that you have to go through. And a lot of people struggle with this. And I gotta tell you, there's a couple of factors. One is the GID, one is the lack of support from their family members and friends. And sometimes it's the time. I know in the medical field, time is a factor with every situation, but time is a real factor when it comes to somebody who is born in a different body than what they identify as, and it's torture. I gotta tell you, you know, it is torture. I'm open about it. I'm open about my journey, but it's awful. And I'll go through the steps and show you, okay? So I first started with coming out. Now, coming out was not a big issue for me. This was back in 2010. I had come out already because I had identified as a woman before. Obviously, I was born a woman. Okay, Gwyneth was my name. And I came out as a lesbian. So I had already come out once before. So it was not a big deal for coming out again. So I was very lucky in a sense that I was, my parents were very supportive. All my friends have been very supportive. Incredible people, just incredible people. So I was very lucky there. So next, because I came out, I ended up talking to my endocrinologist. Now I already had my endocrinologist already because I was born with a hormone disorder, funny enough. So I was born with too much testosterone and very little estrogen, okay? So I was already seeing an endocrinologist for gender disorder. So I told her, I said, you know what, this is me. This is who I am. And I didn't go to her without researching. Usually people who are trans, they not only want to associate with other people that are going through the same thing for relatedness, right? Relativity, okay? That's what it is. But they'll research about the processes it takes in order to transition through their journey. And so they will be at least a little bit, if not well educated on the transition process. Okay. So as medical practitioners know that, okay, it's a very good thing to know. Okay. So when I went to my endocrinologist, she had never dealt with somebody who was trans. She had never had a patient who was transitioning, and she didn't know the processes. Okay. So we worked together. Thanks to Katya, actually, who told me about this patient partner thing. That's a really cool terminology, because it was really, I was partnering with her so that we could do the transition together, so she could kind of learn the process and I could learn the process as well at the same time. So there was this beautiful knowledge sharing that we had. And kudos to her, fantastic woman, fantastic endocrinologist, and I couldn't have wished for anybody better. So there's a key thing, okay? It's this knowledge sharing, right? You have to be open, and I was so happy that she was open and honest, and she said, I don't know what I'm doing, but you know what? I'm gonna research and we'll do this together. You know, she was open about that, and I just loved her for that. You know, you're a doctor, okay? You're a doctor, you're a medical student, you're also human. You can't know everything. You can't, right? Okay. So that was my first step into the medical field, was my endocrinologist, which was great. Okay. Then she told me, you have to be a man in society, basically, for a year. You have to act as a man. You have to be a man. So what did this entail? So this entailed chest binding. Okay. I would have to go into a male washroom. Okay. Even though I was very feminine looking, I still had to go into a male washroom, because that was the protocol. That's what you do before starting hormone replacement therapy, which is the HRT, right? So I did that for a year, started hormone replacement therapy, went through the hormone replacement therapy. It did a lot of biological changes, from facial hair to losing my hair on my head to going through puberty a second time, right? So that was my stage there, and I did that, and I still shoot myself today in my leg. I still have an intramuscular needle that I have to give myself every 2 weeks. But that's when my hormone replacement therapy started. So then I had to, in order to get top surgery, which I knew I wanted to get because it was very uncomfortable with my breasts. Okay, I was very, very large, and I was very uncomfortable. And every time I would go out, you'd see me slunch. Like my back would be curved because I didn't want to show anybody that I had breasts. Okay, so I had to go to a psychiatrist. I had to see two. One I saw at a university during my undergrad. Right? And the second one I saw later on that was referred to me. Unfortunately, the second one took a year and a half to get, and unfortunately that physician didn't speak English. So that was a problem. And it was the time that it took to get the top surgery was a bit of a struggle and a problem. I know, like, for medical practitioners, I know a lot of them figure, well, it's not really a life or death, and it's not, but it can be. And here's where I say it can be. Over 20% of trans individuals attempt to commit suicide. And one of the reasons why, there are many variables. Okay, there's again, as I said, support, right? It's a huge problem. Okay, if people don't have support, financial. If you don't have finances, it's a huge problem. But some of it is time. Okay, and I was lucky that I had the money, because I said, you know what, screw it. I know it's covered by Quebec, in the Quebec province here in Canada, but I said, screw it, and I'm going to Ontario, and I'm going to get top surgery there. So I ended up paying for it in the end, okay, because it just took too much time. And I was lucky that I had a good nest. I was lucky that I had the finances to do that. If I didn't, it would be a problem. I'd probably go into depression. Maybe not attempt suicide, but who knows, but it would be a problem, okay? Because pretend like you're waking up, and you're waking up in the wrong gendered skin, okay? And society looks at you one way where you identify as the other. It's hell. It is, I'm happy-go-lucky, but when it comes to this stuff, it really is hell, okay? And understanding that and understanding your patient is key to success, right? So this is why I'm relating this to you guys. Okay, so then after top surgery, I got my hysterectomy, and I was very much pushing for my hysterectomy on several fronts. One was my mother died of ovarian cancer, and the second I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is cysts all over your ovaries. And I don't know if you guys have read about this PCOS, but you know, I had quite a lot of cysts on my ovaries. I wanted to get it out, and plus I knew I wasn't going to have a kid at any time soon. So I got it out in 2015. And then my legalization of my name. Now, I can't speak for other countries in the world, unfortunately, about this, but in Canada, this is how it works. In Canada, you have to have be on hormone replacement therapy and have one surgery to be considered as the opposite sex that you were born in. So that for specifically physical ID. Okay, so in order to do legalize your name, you have to have a hormone replacement therapy, top surgery, or a bottom surgery, whichever, and then you could legalize your name and gender. Excuse me, and gender. Okay, now the gender your name has to match the gender on the identification. Now, it took me 3 years to do, and I'll explain why. It comes down to the communication again, right? So, and systems and communication, okay? So I was born in Ontario, but I was a resident of Quebec. Now, because I had to go back and forth between the two provinces, the one province said it was the process of the other province, which said it was a process of the former province, right? So I was getting ping pong back and forth, because nobody knew the process and how I should be legalizing my name and my gender, because my birth certificate was in Ontario, but my health card and everything else is in Quebec, and it's a provincial thing, right? So I ended up having to legalize my gender before I legalized my name. So I was actually, funny enough, Mr. Gwyneth Matheson. And then I was finally Tristan Matheson, and I had to hand in my birth name in Quebec, get it registered, and then ask for a change of name. So it was a bit of a very complicated process that they didn't have down pat. Right? If they had it down pat and the provinces communicated with one another, that wouldn't have taken 3 years. But unfortunately, that's what happened. Okay, and then bottom surgery. Now, bottom surgery, I'm currently researching myself, looking a lot into it. And again, I need specialists to sign off on it, which I'm scared, but it's probably going to be a lot of time again, but hopefully not. So this is something I'm looking into. Okay, so that's my personal journey. Now, challenges for trans and gender X. Physician availability, again, time, okay? Finances, geographical. I'm talking as a privileged person who's in an urbanized city, right? What about all the people who are gender X or trans that are in remote rural cities or rural areas that don't even have internet, okay? That's a problem, right? Process and identification, provincial-wide, even countrywide. Think of Europe, okay? Europe, what does that do? What are the processes there? Say one moves from one country to the other. What happens there? What happens if you need medical attention and one system has gender X and one doesn't? You know, what happens there, right? So those are challenges. Language. There's really a lot of gendered languages. This is one thing that I was working with when I was working on the gender X policy, specifically on my former job. And there's like French, the French language, like Spanish and many other languages are gendered. So what do you do with that, right? How do you communicate with somebody who's gender X? That is a real pickle, I gotta say. And then, of course, your digital systems, which I've mentioned, global acceptance, so cultural. That's also a challenge. There's still places in the world where people will get prosecuted and killed. And of course, support, both for practitioners and patients. So the things that I've been suggesting or the things that I've been mentioning, it's not just the patient who can identify as gender X or trans. You're working with colleagues, right? So you want to be as knowledgeable as you can, not just for your work, but also just for your colleagues, like for your family, right? Who you see often, you know? So that's very important. So now some of the recommendations I would suggest, and this is why I put a slide on ecosystem. You guys are medical students, okay? You're medical practitioners. You are the stakeholders. Evaluate your training. You know, push your management in HR. Say, we need the tools. We want the tools. We want to have a reputation and a good one. We want to have a place in a hospital that's fully inclusive. So you need to give us the tools and training that we need for this, okay? Demand it. You know, maybe it's not your job to come up with that, and it's your job, not your job, but demand it for somebody who really needs to do that for you guys, okay? Governmental updates, just stay updated, especially when you're dealing with medical cards, okay? You come across a medical card, you want to know that, okay, this is what they're doing in this province, or this is what they're doing in this country, you know? You want to be updated with that. Have a consistent process put in place. That is key to success in any organization or institution or medical field or wherever you're working, right? And knowledge share. Knowledge share is probably one of the biggest, and open communication. You know, don't be afraid not to know what you don't know. Be afraid of thinking you know everything, okay? That's what you need to do, okay? So that's my recommendations. And questions, thank you. Is there any questions?
So maybe people can write their question, or if you want to take the microphone, just write your name on the chat. So thank you very much again, Tristan, for sharing your story and your journey, which continues today.
Yes.
Your presentation illustrates how a small action in our meeting with patient or and interprofessional communication can transform our environment and be an open space, non-judgmental. Apart from our behavior, we must take action to in our health system, in our health society, to welcome these patients who may blend in with the crowd because they are not a visible minority.
Yes, it's almost an invisible minority, huh?
And, so it's quite impressive how much in your journey you face discrimination in sector in our health system that maybe we were not aware, like the administration just writing the papers to have a health card. Sometimes people will face their dysphoria and all the distress that came with this issue. We have questions. So one was before in the presentation is, how does gender X related to androgyny?
Androgyny. Oh yeah, I answered that. I'm at, does the RAMQ cover a good part of the transition process costs? That's a good question. So it does. As long as you have the the 2 psychiatrists assessments, okay. It does if you have an endocrinologist assessment, or saying a letter from them, a letter from your family. There's a lot of things that you have to fill out forms and stuff before you get a consultation. Once the consultation happens, then you could possibly get surgery. And yes, it is covered. Yes, it is covered. It depends though on the time for the person, right? Again, you're waking up every day where you're strapping your breast to you, close, you know, really close to you, and you can hardly breathe, but you do that so that you can feel like, you know, who you need to be. It's rough, right?
Also, it's you can have health complication with the bind.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and some surgeries are still considered experimental, although they are covered. I know the M to F is more successful, the bottom surgery, and then the female to male, F to M, okay? But it is covered, yes. In all countries, it's partially covered. Like in the States, one of my friends, he's going through it, and it's partially covered by his insurance. So not all fully covered. Okay, do you want me to read it, or do you want to read it, Katia? Next one.
You can read it.
Okay. I had a question about the process of transitioning, but at a younger age. Do you know if the process is similar for kids under the age of 18 as it is for adults? Or are there certain things in Quebec that we cannot offer to children who want to start transitioning? Oh, that's a great question. It's a very good question. There's been a lot of debate over this, okay? There's been a lot of debate over transgender kids. Actually, there's been a lot of documentaries over transgender kids. It's not the same process. Okay, you can get what are called hormone blockers, like puberty, like hormone blockers, right? So instead of, say you were born a woman, instead of getting breasts, they have these hormone blockers which will prevent you from getting breasts, which makes surgery, if you have to have it in the first place, a lot easier. As for the age on which you can start, it's very iffy. I know that there was kids that were like 6 and 7 are saying like they're in the wrong body and they get dysphoria at that young age. I know medically they were talking in medical journals there about the brain development and how the brain actually doesn't fully form until your mid-20s. So whether or not people can identify themselves as that before in an earlier stage is still up for debate.
If I can add, there's a documentation and articles by the Pediatrician Society of Canada, if you want to check their website. Also, there's many debates. Usually they will ask the children to go more by the social part, and they don't want to cut too much the puberty just through the growth process, even though there's all the development of the second genital or sexual organs like breast.
Yeah.
They pass through. And also, like Tristan said, sometimes gender can be fluid. So we want to make sure that the kid have developed and fell in not the gender that he wants before starting the process, because the medication, it's a permanent treatment, even though we can stop the testosterone, for example.
Yes, it is. I mean, like if I stopped the testosterone, okay, what would happen is my hair, it would still be there, it'd still be present, but be less. Okay, my voice would be a lot higher. It wouldn't be as low, but there's some things that are very irreversible. Right?
Exactly. So we don't want to. For the moment, it's really hard to say it's a cutoff. It's a gray zone, because we want to make sure that the patient have fully understood all the consequences, the impact, and the benefits of all the treatment. Mm-hmm. So it's really a harsh question. Mm-hmm. But a good one.
A very good one. Very, very good one.
So if you want to...
yes, there was a question about language. So French language, what are the options for inclusive pronouns? Also Spanish. They're still out on that. The Language Commission of Canada, they're still out on that. They're still trying to debate on, because it's not just pronouns, right? You're talking about prepositions, you're talking about adjectives, especially if you're talking specifically about someone, right? It changes the form of the word, right? So it's unfortunately more than pronouns. So they're still working on that. They're still trying to figure it out. Unfortunately, they haven't come to a full conclusion yet. But I know for English, it's they. Yeah.
En français, il y a...
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, but I was about to say that. So basically, it's not something that's official on paper, but unofficially, a lot of institutions use neologisms, like words that were invented for the pronouns. So there's EL, EL, or ELLE.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So those are like gender neutral. So you can use those.
For Spanish, I'm a Spanish speaker, and I didn't really heard about a consensus for the moment. Maybe in the Latin countries, they already have their non-official pronoun, like in Quebec, the yell in French. but I'm sure they already, their community already thinking. And if someone wants to share, it will be lovely to learn something today. But
yeah.
when I'm speaking with patients and they're trans, I ask them which pronoun they are more comfortable, and
That's good.
I'm giving an apology, because maybe I will try to find pronouns that's more neutral. But if I'm like I do a mistake, I'm sorry, it wasn't voluntary. So, and usually people are really open and understanding just the fact that I'm aware and I'm trying. They are really open about this.
Yeah, absolutely. You're open and honest. You're human beings, right? You're busy people. You work long hours. You study a lot. Okay. You have a lot of information in your head. Okay. This is, if you're open with your patient and say, listen, like, I'm just so you know, like, I'm trying, you know, this is the pronoun that you go with. And I will try to make sure that that's what I use, you know, and you're human, you know, make mistakes, right? And if I were to do a presentation to people who are gender X and transgender, I would be giving a talk about how we have to be accepting and patient too. And we have to understand, you know, understand others as well, you know, like, for example, when you're trans, you know, you have to understand that your parents, even if they're super supportive, they're going through a death because they're losing the person that they knew for so many years, right? So it goes both ways. Mm-hmm.
So you have two more questions?
Okay. Let's see.
So it's from Gali and
Attraction as a parameter. Same theories include the attraction as a parameter in the gender, like LGBTQ2 plus, like sexual attraction you're talking about.
I don't know if I can express myself by talking, or should I write in the chat?
Yeah, just talk. Just talk.
So basically, there is like two theories. One is the gender unicorn, and the other is the gender bread. So
yeah, the gender bread. Yes, the gender bread.
Yes, so like in the gender bread, you have 4 parameters, the 3 you told us.
Yes.
But also the attraction that can be divided to 2, the emotional attraction and the sexual attraction.
Yeah.
And like this parameter is considered as one of the 4 parameters that can identify the gender.
There's a reason why I didn't include that. I think the reason why is when you're attracted to somebody, sexual attraction, okay, you're dealing with outside of you, right? So you're dealing with somebody else who they're attracted to, if they're attracted to the same as you, right? It's your relationship with them. Gender is more yourself, right? It's about yourself, how you express. It doesn't affect anybody else. You don't have, you know, it's more about you. When you're having a relationship, it's about 2. So I'm talking about you, like a singular, right? If you have a relationship with somebody, it's about 2 or 3, maybe. Who knows? It's about other people, right? It is in the realm, the LGBTQ2 plus, like you got like two-spirited, right? Intersex, asexual, but it's all intermingled in between sexuality and gender. Gender is one thing, sexuality is another. Who you're attracted to is one thing. How you express yourself, how you identify as yourself, how you are biologically born is a totally different thing. I hope that clarifies. But I love the gingerbread gender, man, because it's not a linear thing. It's not a Kinsey scale. It's more of a circular kind of nonstop form. It's very good. Yes. Thanks for bringing that up, by the way.
Do we have any other questions?
There's 2 actually. I can read them. So I was From Gali Sandrine, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I was wondering, for a person wishing to transition, having to go through 2 psychiatrists and getting all these letters in order to begin their transition, how does it affect them?
Again, it depends if you're lucky or not. I was lucky in a sense that I was in an urbanized city. There was a lot of physicians, although physicians and medical practitioners, as you know, and as I'm sure you are all aware, are very busy people, right? And you're dealing with a lot of emergencies and a lot of things a lot of the time. I was lucky in the sense that I had support, but if, for instance, I didn't have that support, or I didn't have that financial stature of going to a different place and just buying my top surgery, I would be in a bit of a pickle, yes, and depression would set in. So and say you're in an environment like up north, or in a very like rural place in some country in Europe or something, and you don't have access to the medical staff, or you don't have a family doctor, or you know, and you don't know where to start, you know, it's a problem. It's a real problem, and it's very isolating because you feel like not only are you different, but no one's there to help. And that's something that I know all of us want to try and avoid.
We have time for one more question.
There's Kevin who asked, do you think that semiotics should be erased?
That's a good question. You know, here's my opinion. If you add more genders to things when you don't need them, get rid of them. Why complicate things more? If you have a bathroom, okay, and it has a female and male sign, it might, and there's been safety concerns about that and stuff, like people coming in and molesting and all this other stuff, okay? Fine. To appease those concerns, architecturally, you can make it so that the stalls go right down to the floor, right? There's ways in which to rearrange that kind of space. But as for the semiotics, why would you need them? Just say bathroom or restroom. You know, it's the same as prefixes. If you don't know what to say and you don't know who, you know, just use their name. You know, why make it complicated, right? So that my opinion on that is if gender is not needed, or knowing somebody's gender is not needed in either a space or a location, or even on forms that you fill out, if gender is like, why do we need gender for, like, say, why do we need gender for our license? Besides premiums for insurance companies, right? But why do we need it, right? Does it affect really how we drive? Huh? So why would we need those things? Like, you know, medical staff, and I know in Ontario they're talking about erasing gender from health cards. Now that I think, you know, because biologically we are built differently, anatomically we are built differently, and if you're going into a hospital for an emergency, the medical staff have to know what biologically you are, right? But for certain spaces that you don't need gender, you should just get rid of it. Yeah, why make life complicated?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tristan. I'm going to stop the recording.